Live and people are starting to slip into this session here. For those who don't already know, I am Kate Powell with Kate for the People, which is my goofy little name for what I'm doing, yelling at our electeds over on social media and telling them how to do their job. And joining me is Hunter Miranda out of California 47. I'll let him introduce himself in just a second. But for those who do not understand what we are doing here, we are part in the Candidates of Our Dreams series, or Fellowship of the Congressional Ring, whichever your favorite
Oh yeah.
preference is. Uh, you want to be nerdy or not. And we're talking to candidates who are primarying Democrats, who are challenging GOP. Basically, we need a new Congress because this Congress ain't it, for so many reasons, and we're done with them. So it's time to give ourselves a new one for Christmas next year. And we want to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success along those lines. So I think I've given people enough time to filter in here, and they'll probably continue to filter in. But Hunter, go ahead and introduce yourself for the people who are watching now and will be watching later.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And for the work you do is so important and needed. So just want to say thank you again. I'm very grateful to be here and chatting with you and your followers. So yeah, like you said, my name is Hunter Garcia Miranda. I am running in California's 47th congressional district. And just to make everyone aware, that is Southern California, specifically Orange County, the southern parts of Orange County. So that's inclusive of a lot of people know Irvine, Laguna Beach, Dana Point, and then it goes up into Tustin now after Prop 50, and also inclusive of Laguna Hills, Laguna Woods, Foothill Ranch, Aliso Viejo. So kind of that whole southern swath of Southern Orange County. I was born and raised in the district, have grown up here my whole life, and then had the opportunity to go to school at UC Berkeley, where I started. Actually, that's kind of where I initially got involved in policy work, working with the UC Berkeley Policy Institute as a volunteer capacity. But what the Institute would do would often bring policy proposals to elected officials at the federal level. And this was back in 2016, like when we were talking about these root causes of so many issues that we're facing as a nation. For example, the monopolization of our entire economy that is being now dominated by massive multinational corporations, massive tax reform to actually get at the hoarding of wealth that the billionaire and millionaire class do, and taking the burden off of the working class, getting money out of politics. The things that we hear so many progressive candidates screaming at the top of their lungs. We were trying to get elected officials to do that basically a decade ago. And every single time on both parties, it was the same excuses when it came to these real root cause issues. And surprise, surprise, it was the money every single time. These billionaire and millionaire corporations and the millionaire billionaire class spend billions of dollars to get federally elected officials elected so that they then pass the policies that benefit those corporations. This is a process we've seen occur over the last 30, 40 years where you've seen just a massive consolidation of power and wealth amongst the wealthiest among us, to the complete detriment of the working class. And unfortunately, that was something that the Democratic Party would not wake their eyes up to and really acknowledge their role in that. And we see that now playing out where every single time, a Democrat is confronted with the things that the party could have been doing differently, or even before Trump was elected, it always comes back to, oh, well, look how terrible Donald Trump is. We have to just focus on how terrible he is. And yes, we all understand that it's vitally important that we do that as a party, where you fight evil with one hand, but you have to simultaneously be showing the good and the possibilities that we can be delivering for the working class. And it's become apparent that the party just has failed at doing that, both in strategy and in policy. You see time and time again the party just essentially running on the same exact platform, where you have corporate Democrats just demanding the same things over and over again, which is essentially all talk. They'll say that they'll stand up for this or fight for this, but then when it comes to those actual root causes and addressing those issues through policy, they fall short every single time. So it got to the point where, if they're not going to do it, then we have to be having people challenge them and run against them that are willing to run on these really bold policy reforms that are possible. These aren't anything extreme. These are just simple requests that would create a fair system for the working class. So I'm super excited and grateful to be part of a national coalition of candidates that are running that are on this platform. One such group is known as Citizens for Impeachment. They've got an organization collective known as the Courage Candidates. One of their main priorities as of now is ensuring the impeachment of Donald Trump, which is vitally important, and simultaneously building platforms that would actually deliver for the working class and actually address those root cause issues. So I'm super excited to be here. And a quick little run through of how our timeline is working out is that we have primaries that run from May 4th is when voters will be sent their ballots, and then they have until June 2nd of this year to vote. So that's kind of the timeline for the primary that we're running, and where I'll be challenging an incumbent Democrat. And then the November election would be the general election where the final runoff would be. So that's a quick overview of who we are.
Perfect. Yeah. And November 3rd is general, though I mean, I'm gonna be saying that so many times between now and November. Like it's burned into my
Right.
brain.
Exactly. No,
So
no forgetting that.
no one no one forget November 3rd. It's like remember the 3rd of November or something. Like that's the new thing. Awesome. Thank you so much for that comprehensive overview. It's funny. One of the very first interviews that I sat for was someone when this platform started becoming something. I was talking about electoral finance in the Democratic Party in particular, because it's interesting. The person I was talking to, and this is on my Substack, you can go back and watch it, but the person I was talking to was shocked when I was explaining that there was more dark money put into Democratic candidates in the 2024 federal election, way more than the GOP candidates. Like over $1 billion worth of dark money to Democratic candidates. And I remember she was like, "That's how?" And I was like,
It's
it's I mean, why not? Like, it makes if I'm a billionaire, I'ma hedge my bets, right? You get
exactly.
money and you get money. So that whoever wins, like, it's a lot easier than organizing, right? Just
Exactly. No,
right price.
that's the thing is that's the biggest thing is that a lot of people don't realize that, and it's so. And okay, I just want to also preface this that I want the strongest Democratic Party possible. So I'm not here just to bash Democrats and say, like, I want us to improve and build as a party so that we stop losing to people like Donald Trump. The fact that we lost to that twice, that the American people chose that over what they thought they saw as the establishment that has continuously failed them, that reality has to sink in for Democrats. And we have to say, we fundamentally have to change as a party to ensure that we're actually improving people's lives through policy and making their lives easier as a working class people, rather than, like you said, just relying on these donors that will literally spend billions of dollars to fund these campaigns that then get, a status quo Democrats elected that we've seen run for the last 20, 30 years on the same exact policies and strategies that clearly are not delivering for the working class. And like you said, a lot of people don't realize that because it's so easy for the Democrats to hide behind, oh, well, just look how horrible Trump is. We have to just do everything we can to fight that and focus on that. It's saying, no, we as a party have to improve and actually change when it comes to policy and strategy to show the working class people of this country that we are willing to fight for them and have a backbone and actually stand up for these things, instead of just doing the same things where we are just being critical of MAGA and saying, how horrible it is, the things that they're doing while they're doing those things to people in our country. That's just clearly not enough. So I'm very glad you mentioned that because that is such a big issue that a lot of people don't realize or see. And that's one thing we've been screaming at the party for so long to try and recognize. And now that it's gone to the point where if they're not willing to do it, then we have to be the ones to step up and actually take those positions of power for the people back, and do it ourselves. No one's going to come and save us at this point. That's become, I think, very apparent for so many people across the country. And I think we're at such a pivotal point where things have gotten so bad that people are really waking up and saying, okay, the establishment clearly isn't going to do what they need to do. They're not going to come save us. We, the people, have to take power back and actually implement these changes ourselves.
Exactly. I always say, like, we are the Avengers that we are
Yep,
looking for. Like,
literally. And
the Constitution starts with "we the people,"
yep.
like, those are
And
the structure.
that's not a vague concept. That's not some nebulous concept. That is literally us. That is you and me. That is the people that we interact with every single day. That's our parents. That's our kids. We are the people, and that strength and that power that we have, so many people forget. And it's intentional, right? It's this the problems that we face are meant to seem too big to address, that you as an individual aren't going to be able to do anything about it. And those are just lies. Those are intentional lies fed to us to keep us in submission and not actually know our full strength. When we, if you think about it, the United States voter is literally is the most powerful position in the world, because the decisions that we make not just impact the people here in the United States, but they impact people across the globe. These are global impacts that we have, and that power as American voters. And we have to reclaim that and realize that power that we have. And in spite of everything that they say and everything that they try and do to keep us down and keep us separated and make us feel weak, we just always have to remember that power.
Exactly. Awesome. All right, Hunter, I'm going to put you through the candidate of our dreams checklist.
Love it.
And you can, from there, take whatever points you want and start talking. You can score yourself. You can do whatever your heart tells you to do. So, the candidate of our dreams, according to some girl on the internet that you're talking to right now, does the following: takes $0 in corporate campaign money, and I would say electoral finance reform in general, term limits themselves and advances term limit legislation, reasserts their power over the Supreme Court. This is a big one for me. I can't
Mm,
say that much.
yep.
Raises wages and reinstates corporate tax marginalization,
Hmm.
increases tax marginalization for high net worth individuals, bans stock buybacks. I entirely, ideally, but I'll settle for partial bans as well.
Hmm.
Invests in a robust, nimble, and strategic administrative state, advances universal healthcare and education, and finally, but not least importantly, maybe most importantly, commits to multilateral, non-interventionist foreign policy. How do you feel
Yes.
about that list, Hunter?
That sounds like a perfect dream list that I completely agree with. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to get into each one, but kind of a very quick general overview. I think that those touch on every essential key part of our economy and our government. That is, like I keep saying, the root causes of these issues that we keep facing as a nation. That again, at the federal level, you see time and time again. One, if even if federally elected officials even talk about these issues, so many of the times these are never even mentioned because they love their distractions, they love their things that they, their clickbait and the things that they can get donations out of. But when it comes to actually addressing these issues, they one never even talk about them, or two give surface level answers about how they're going to fight for this and stand up for that without any actual tangible policy specifics. Which is why it's so refreshing to see people actually calling that out and holding them accountable for that, and simultaneously ensuring that the candidates that we are electing to challenge them do hold those values and those standards and have those policy positions specifically that can be implemented and put in. So, kind of, I guess, to start with, one of the most important and pressing, in my opinion, is campaign finance reform. You have to kind of get to the people that are being elected to fix those legislative issues. And with that being, like you talked about at the top of the interview, is that so much dark money is being funneled into our politics that no one even really understands the scale at which it's occurring. That is completely counterintuitive to what we are as a democracy. And you've seen this process occur and gradually occur and strengthen essentially over the last 30 years, culminating in Citizens United with money being equivalent to freedom of speech, allowing these corporations to be seen as people in the eyes of the Supreme Court ruling, which is why we're very excited and will be continuously pushing for a constitutional amendment to address that issue at its core. With that being said, obviously, I'm sure everyone's well aware that that is a high standard to meet in a process that occurs, and that will be a fundamental thing that we'll be constantly pushing for. But simultaneously, there's so many legislators legislative actions that can be done in spite of a full constitutional amendment that could improve that process and really strengthen that. If you look in the past history of the United States, there were certain periods in our country where we had the most comprehensive anti-corruption, anti-bribery laws that really strengthened our electoral system, whether that be through public payment options or just fundamentally allowing transparency in who's actually making those donations. And those were so incredibly effective in the past. And then, surprise, surprise, they were just chiseled away at to allow the system that we have to occur because you have so much money pouring into these processes that benefit those corporations by changing the laws to allow them to keep doing that. And that's what you get now, where you have, like you said, where billions of dollars are funneled to essentially keep the status quo because that's what those corporations in the billionaire, millionaire class donate thrive off of. And if you don't have politicians in office that are not beholden to that and saying, hey, no, there is an alternative. We can do something differently and not rely on these corporate donations, which is why we're very, excited to not even take a dollar of corporate PAC money. Which is a big differentiation between a lot of so many Democrat incumbents that are running right now.
Mhm.
And making sure that we're actually, responsive to the people. So we are a completely grassroots funded campaign. Small dollar donations are so vitally important to our campaign. And we are up against, a giant. We're well aware of that reality. So with that being said, this kind of ties into the point about, super efficient and effective administrative state that would actually implement those policies efficiently and effectively. You see so many of our tax dollars going to subsidies to subsidize massive corporations because essentially, if you really boil down to the root causes, these corporations are not paying their workers nearly enough to live. So then the government has to come in and subsidize that through whether it be SNAP benefits, Medicaid, housing supply, all of these different things and programs that are set up to help people, which are vitally important that people, there's certain always going to be people in our population that need that help and need that assistance. And that's important that we have super strong systems to allow that. But simultaneously realizing that those corporations that are paying those workers are objectively just paying them so low because they're able to get away with it, because they've monopolized the economy, they've bought out our government. And now we're seeing the results of that.
Yeah. It's so hard because, like, when I'm talking to candidates and we're discussing this list, it can be very difficult to be like, well, I want this one, but it also ties into that one. And then we have to do it.
Yeah,
And that's why I crafted the list the way I did. It's like we really are going to need kind of full court press along all these issues. And obviously, progress is not a straight line.
right.
And, and what is successful for California's 47 might not be successful for Illinois 15, or I'm just going to, pull numbers
Exactly.
out of the air. But I think, what I would love for our Congress to do is to get back to being a federal body for one thing.
Mhm.
It's really tricky because of course you're there to represent your district, but at the same time, like, the policy you're advancing is nationwide. And it's like, I want us to get back to these big picture things instead
Exactly.
of going to DC. Like, basically, as a representative, you're going to DC. Krista Huja and I talked about this to bring back money for your district, but to set policy for the nation.
Exactly.
And like, there's this, like, I feel like there's a lot of bring back money for your district, kind of mostly for the oligarchs in your district, depending on which candidate we're talking about,
Bingo.
and not so much policy making
Yeah.
for the nation. That's the part that I'm just like, I need laws,
That's
please.
So that's been kind of the biggest eye opener actually running a campaign. And like you said, you'll, and kind of like what we touched on earlier, you'll rarely hear federally elected officials even touch on these campaigns. They will essentially just toe the party line to say, the party will say, these are the policies that you're going to be supporting and voting for. And it's the same 5 ones that you'll see. Give everyone a challenge right now. Go to 5 establishment incumbent Democrats' websites, and you'll see copy and pasted policies, blocks. They'll cover healthcare, they'll cover the environment, they'll cover, which are vitally important things. These are super important things, but they just skim the surface of the actual real policies that need to be addressed. And those are just what their focus groups happen to tell them, were what people in this one particular focus group were interested in, or what their national polls were saying, and do not actually address the root causes that so many working class people are struggling through. Is so needed and important. And running a race, I'll tell you right now, the kind of institutionalized aspect of campaigning where you have all of these companies that are like built out to help candidates run. I have zero times been asked anything related to policy during my entire campaign. It is all simply back to the money. How much money have you raised? How many millionaires do you know? How many people can you call up to get $7,000 from in a single phone call? Just reinforcing this idea that the entire system is simply focused on money to bring in money both to the DNC and the RNC, without any actual policy goals or policy specifics. It's appalling, honestly, to see the lack of policy understanding that so many elected officials have. And it becomes pretty clear that we're living through that reality, right? Where you see
Yeah.
people can't afford rent, people can't afford food for their children, people can't afford childcare programs. The list goes on and on. Healthcare is now the leading cause of debt in the nation. 800,000 people sleep on our streets every night. A large part of that being veterans. And it's just these insane realities that we're living through. And again, the Democrats refuse to acknowledge the part that they played in creating that system and just want to focus on being anti-Trump. And again, if they're not willing to actually change when it comes to policy and strategy, we'll be seeing these cycles over and over again where the Republicans will win and then the Democrats will win, the Republicans will win again, and that back and forth without any actual structural policy changes. That cycle will continue and continue if we keep electing the same types of people over and over again. Or we can choose something different. We can choose progressive candidates that are willing to actually call out these issues and say, hey, things can be different. These are not big asks. All we want is a fair system that gives people opportunity to actually live their lives to the fullest extent and the fullest happiness that they can. And we're not, it's a simple ask. We're not asking for handouts. We're not asking for anything crazy. We just fair systems in place that allow people to live dignified, happy lives. And that I genuinely believe that can be accomplished, especially now. We're seeing such a turning point in so many people's thought processes on how these things are happening and occurring across the country. And people are really waking up to say, no, we of the people have to actually take this power back. Otherwise, it's just going to be the same stuff over and over.
Exactly. I think that when we're talking about what tends to get in the press, like what you hear in like stump speeches and whatnot, it is a lot of identity politics and it is a lot of issues, but
Mhm.
not necessarily policy. And it's
Exactly.
like, I don't really care if you love trees. I want to know what you're going to do for the tree. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, can we get to the part where you tell me what the law will say? Right? Like,
Exactly.
I just want to know that. Which is why, again, my list is very much like, these are the things I want you to do. If you go
Yes.
sit in that seat, I want you to do X. I want you to ban stock buybacks. It used to be illegal. And then
Right.
Reagan, which I feel like
And
is like the
it,
story of our nation's lives. Like, it used
exactly.
to be illegal and then Reagan.
And then
Um,
Reaga's.
and so, yeah, I really appreciate that. Why don't you grab one of these 9 and tell me, like, what is the magic wand question? I hand you a
Mhm.
magic wand. You're elected day 1 of the 120th Congress. Which one of these would you be like, this is the law that will now be the law of the land if you could just do it that way? Which, of course, is not how it works, but
Yeah, no, I love it. So I think like I said earlier, on top of campaign finance reform, one of the most pressing issues that, again, you'll never really hear federally elected officials talk about is the complete monopolization that we've seen of our entire economy. Where if you look at every major industry in the American economy, it is essentially dominated by 3 to 4 massive corporations, which, if you really dig into it, are usually owned by a single conglomerate. And they've done this intentionally to really make it appear like there's actual competition in our economy when there's really not. And this is a process that's occurred over the last 30 to 40 years where we've seen essentially a complete dismantling or simply just non-enforcement of our antitrust laws. And that's what results in low wages for people, skyrocketing prices for people, skyrocketing premiums for insurance companies that are monopolized insurance. There's every major industry that we're seeing this occur every single time, it's to the detriment of the working class. So if there's one specific thing, there's obviously a long list of things, but one of the biggest and most pressing that you'll never hear federally elected officials on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News even talk about is because soccer, those massive corporations that are benefiting from that. Those news outlets as well are part of that system. So you'll never hear them even ask questions about it. That would be one of the biggest things, is to ensure that those corporations are playing fairly, including breaking up monopolies, including ensuring that their wages are set at fair prices across the board. And one thing you touched on earlier is that some things that's will work in Southern California might be drastically different in Alabama. So one of the things that we're pushing for is a regionally applied federal minimum wage that would allow each individual city to set, depending on its cost of living standards, a price that a corporation would have to pay to ensure for that's one that's one of always the biggest things that you'll hear in opposition to a federal minimum wage. It's saying, well, someone in California that has to make $25 an hour as opposed to someone in rural Alabama who has, could theoretically live off of $15, whatever it is that the cost of living is for that specific area. And one of the easiest ways around that is through regional settings of those prices. And that's just one small thing that could be done to address that issue of income. While ensuring, like I was saying, that those corporations are still going to be making crazy profits. They're going to be completely fine, I promise you. And our
Right.
economy will still be thriving while ensuring that our communities are also thriving. And then on top of that, once you ensure that those corporations are actually paying their people fairly, you can then turn around and do things like tax reform, where you drastically reduce the income tax that people are paying. Because right now, our entire federal government is basically funded through income tax, right? So people that receive checks and people that get paid from work for their work, where you have now is such a massive class of people that have crazy amounts of wealth that are untapped because they don't receive a paycheck. The corporations have systems in place that allow them to work around those taxes. But if you can equalize that and ensure that those people that are essentially hoarding their wealth are paying their fair share, you can simultaneously reduce taxation on individuals that are making income while raising the actual income that they're making as a base. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the American people, we spend our money. A lot of the times the word, people so that's just something that goes back into the economy, and it's a vicious cycle that grows and expands that out. But if you have people stuck in cycles of poverty, which you currently have, where people are struggling to make ends meet because of an intentional system built in place, then those people will just be stuck in those cycles regardless of the potential opportunities that they have, where you can actually break that from happening while making sure that those companies are paying their fair share, both in taxation and to their workers, cut off the subsidies that we've been funneling to them, trillions of dollars. And I know we'd all be surprised at how much the working class is actually able to thrive in this country.
Exactly. I love your idea. I wanna double click on the idea of, regionalizing minimum wage. I don't
Yeah.
think I think it's maybe occurred to me, but I've never really gamed it out. So,
Mhm.
would you say that the federal policy would be like a certain, percentage of, like, based on a cost of living index by
Exactly.
region or whatnot? Okay, okay. I
So
love that idea.
there would be an objective set of standards, and obviously that would have to be delved into the specifics of that and how those are set. But it would essentially say that, okay, the cost of the price of living in this particular city in this state is X amount, meaning corporations have to at bare minimum meet that amount, or obviously ideally go beyond that, and that would be inclusive of rent, healthy options to actually buy healthy foods, emphasis on healthy foods, secure housing, Medicare, and basically all the essentials that people need to survive. And we would also include that with internet as well. That is now in today's modern age become an essential that so many people don't have access to. So that would be the block that would be set, and that would be then applied specifically to each individual city across the country, rather than the constant excuse you hear for why we don't have a federal minimum wage. I think it's currently at $7.25, because the argument of being, well, if you increase it to $15, then you're going to price out the mom and pop shop in Alabama. And there's very valid, arguments around that. that's a very important thing to address, is that a lot of small businesses in rural areas would have a lot of potential problems doing that. But if you implement the regional aspect of it, then that frees up so much possibility and so much opportunity to ensure that everyone across the board is getting what they need to survive in their states. And again, this isn't a crazy ask. No one's asking for anything insane. These are just simple basics to allow people to live dignified, happy lives, and simultaneously give them the opportunity to continue to grow and do what Americans do. We are the people of the United States of America. We're some of the most intuitive and innovative people, and to think of the brain power that is left untapped is like that makes me so upset sometimes. Like, for example, when I was up at UC Berkeley, I was volunteering a lot of local schools in the area in Oakland, and you could just see the disparities across our education system, where you have children that are so incredibly bright and brilliant, just essentially funneled into systems of, okay, this is the job you're going to get, this is the life you're going to live, without any opportunity to grow and improve and see where their potentials could lead them. And to think of the untapped brain power that so many people we're missing out on as a country, and to see that where those people could contributing to our economy, contributing to our country in so many important ways, if they were just given the opportunity and resources to do that, we would see our country just continue to skyrocket. So that's kind of another vitally important thing, and that I hope we can touch on, is the aspect of education and its role in all of this as well.
Amazing. I know, like, I don't want to keep you all night, even though we could probably chat forever, because I can
Oh
tell that
yeah.
you really thought about the interconnectedness of the policies, which I really appreciate that. You are running as a Democrat against another Democrat. Your seat is currently held by a Democrat. So, what motivates you to get into this race? I mean, we've talked a lot, obviously, about the DNC in general, but I would love to know what you feel like why your district would be better represented by you versus Representative Min, who is currently in the seat. So, any thoughts you have about that, like policy wise? Like, what is it that you feel like, okay, he has not advanced this. I feel like I need to do it on behalf of California 7. So, however you want to answer that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. So, like you said, I'm running against the current incumbent Democrat, Dave Min. And so I'd like to start both with policy and then touch on kind of strategy and overall vision for the party. So, specifically on policy. We have one of the largest Hispanic populations, being, we are Southern California, we're super close to the border. And with that being said, obviously the current situations occurring with ICE have been horrendous in our communities and across the nation. Everyone is, I think, well aware of the atrocities and evils that are being committed on the people in our country. And one of the biggest focuses for our campaign is ensuring that these processes and these people are protected. We have 70% of people that have been detained by ICE have no criminal record at all. You have children being detained and held in places that no child should ever be held in, well beyond the federal law allows. I'm an attorney, and I started also working in pro bono work on the immigration side through the Immigration Justice Campaign, which ensures that people going through the immigration process, either before being taken by ICE or during their processing through ICE, have access to legal representation, specifically also informing their families of the resources and things that they have. Because you have people, in a lot of cases where it'll be a mother going to pick up groceries for her children, just be disappeared overnight without their children even knowing where she is, their family knowing where she is, or the potential that she could be deported to some other country that she's never been to, and the list goes on of just the atrocities that are occurring. And so while this was occurring, our congressman helped Republicans pass the Lake and Riley Act, as well as two other House resolutions that drastically reduce due process protections for immigrant communities. In addition to voting to send appreciation to ICE while these atrocities were occurring in our district, and then having run a campaign off of being pro-immigrant and pro-community, and then voting that way, which is just a complete turnaround, is just a small example of that. In addition to that. he voted to pass the military budget, which gave an additional $10 billion on top of what the Trump administration asked for in funding to perpetuate these global conflicts abroad that the United States has been responsible for decades. And he refuses to acknowledge the role that the military-industrial complex plays in our global, foreign policy, and the simple reality that the United States has been a perpetuator of violence across the globe for so long because of the greed of corporations in our country that benefit off of those conflicts.
Yeah.
Um, he also recently voted to increase $3.3 billion spending to fund Israel as they're actively committing a genocide against the Palestinians, something he's refused to acknowledge and continues to support offensive weaponry sale. And that's another massive issue that the Democratic Party has just refused to acknowledge. The simple fact that we as the United States are actively funding and supporting a genocide against the Palestinian people. And if we don't have representatives in power that are, one, willing to call that out, and two, ensure the self-determination of the Palestinian people, then we will keep seeing these atrocities occur over and over again. He's also voted to give the Trump administration sweeping police power in D.C. He's also voted, time and time again to help Republicans in a lot of ways. And most importantly, kind of going to the second part of my discussion, is the real focus of the party. The focus of the party has to be ensuring that our working class people are taken care of and have the foundations they need. And through the policies that he's running on, that won't be accomplished. And if we don't have voices in the party that are willing to actually call out the party and acknowledge all the things that we're doing wrong, and simultaneously be pushing for bold reform that actually helps the working class, ends the genocide, ends all of these atrocities that we're seeing, then again, we're going to be stuck in these same cycles over and over again. And if we don't have bold vision in the party, something that unfortunately the current congressman isn't delivering on, then we'll be stuck in these same cycles. Which is why, again, I'm so excited to be part of there's so many grassroots candidates running across the country. So I'd highly encourage everyone that's on here listening to really delve into who's running in your primaries, wherever you are across the country, and really do a deep dive and not just assume that, oh, the incumbent Democrat, at least it's not a Republican, let me
Right.
just vote that way. So I'd highly encourage everyone to do that, and specifically look into their policies and compare their policy platforms to other candidates that are running. You see a lot of grassroots candidates, like our campaign, is highly focused on policy. So if you go to our website, it's huntermiranda2026.com. You can see our entire policy platform. We have it broken up into 17 specific policy areas, each with individual specific policy goals that we will be pushing for and ensuring that are implemented once we do enter office. So I'd like everyone to acknowledge that and realize that the parties right now, if you look at the actual statistics on people that have been registering for the party system, the AP just came out with a report showing that 74% of registered voters are now independent, 27% Democrat, 25% Republican. And sorry, those numbers may be a little switched, but it just goes to show the drastic increase, specifically among younger generations. Younger generations, my generation, I'm Gen Z, generations below me they've realized that the party system is fundamentally broken. And if we as the Democratic Party aren't willing to acknowledge that and say, hey, we have to drastically change both in policy and strategy, then we'll just completely lose out on that block of voters and people that have been rightfully so fed up with the system, that will keep losing elections, and this will be the consequence, where you have Donald Trump just completely decimating our Constitution. And just because he can't run next time, who knows what he's going to do to maybe not make that happen. But even if he doesn't, that MAGA mindset has been so ingrained in the Republican Party that it is essentially just the Republican Party is pretty much dismantled and become the MAGA Party. And it obviously be interesting to see how that unfolds. But we as the Democrats have to show a bold alternative to that actually delivers for working class people. Like we keep saying, through specific policies, like you list in your dream, score, like we talked about in our policy platform, all of those specifics that are, really get to the root causes of these issues. And don't just settle for the Democrat that says that they're going to fight for the working class, or that they're going to fight for the environment and all those things. Actually look at what they do is so important and needed. So, yeah.
Amazing. Awesome. All right. Well, Hunter, you slid beautifully into the plugs at the end. So you are Hunter Miranda 2026 .com, right?
Yep,
That's your campaign page. Fantastic. And I know you're all over social media. So it's Hunter Miranda 2026 on the
exactly.
handles as well?
Yep,
Fantastic. I love
yeah,
it when
across
those
platforms. Yeah, so
oh,
yeah, anyone can, we'd highly encourage everyone to follow us. We're always talking specific policies on that, across our social medias, and we love engaging with voters. We love hearing, your takes on these things. Again, this is us, this isn't just a me. My name is just on the campaign, but this is our seat and this is our government. So I hope everyone realizes that they are a vital and part of that. So we love discussing, and if you ever want to contact us as well, I love having conversation with voters. Even if you're not in our district, I'd love to hear your takes on things. We have a contact form on our website that you can reach out, and we'll be sure to follow up and get in touch with you. And again, we love hearing feedback, whether it be policies, specific policies, whether it be overall strategy, or whether you just want to talk about the future of our country. We love doing that. So please feel free to reach out. Like you said, it's huntermiranda2026.com, and across all platforms is Hunter Miranda 2026. We are like I said earlier, a grassroots campaign that does rely on small dollar donations. So if anyone is able, we highly, highly appreciate it. It genuinely is so impactful for our campaign. Even if it's a single dollar, that goes so far. And we really appreciate that. So if anyone's able and willing, then they can do that either through our website or just huntermiranda2026.com/donate. And yeah.
and do you have volunteer opportunities for your campaign right now?
Yes. So yes, thank you for that. We have plenty of so if you go to huntermiranda2026/.com/volunteer, we have a volunteer form that you can fill out and we can get you in touch. Even if you're not in our district, we do national phone banking. We do writing letters where we have tons of volunteer opportunities for people to do across the country. Or if you are in Southern California, specifically in Orange County, and want to get involved, we're basically canvassing every single day. We've already knocked 10,000 doors, and we're approaching 20,000 in our district, and we're just ramping that number up. We've built out a pretty wide ground game now, so we're really hopeful that that'll drive us through the election super strongly. And again, if anyone is in the area and wants to help out, we are always welcome. And we can always work around, whether it be different issues that think people have. I know a lot of people sometimes are hesitant about wanting to go knock doors or things
Oh yeah.
like that, but we have pretty well built out training programs as well as plenty of other opportunities. So don't think that you have to be siloed into one thing. And we love to utilize people's unique skills. So many people have such unique and important skills that they can bring to the table. So we love tapping into that, whether it be, social media related, whether it be poetry. We have a few volunteers that have been really helpful in our messaging because they love poetry. So everyone has something important to bring to the table. So we're always welcome for anyone willing to help out. And it's
Mhm.
truly going to take us all, right? Like
It
anyone,
really
every little thing, it's genuinely going to take us all to really address these issues that we're facing.
absolutely. I could not agree more. So y'all follow if you want to send a donation, send donations. I've had that happen on several of these interviews. People were like, I donated in the chat.
Aw, love it.
Sign up to volunteer. Really, at the end of the day, like we can donate all the money in the world, but if people don't know the name, and they don't realize that they should do something with that ballot they get in May or anything like, especially because Prop 50 has changed the electoral calendar this year. So things
Mhm.
are going to be there's going to be a lot of educating and a lot
Right.
of explaining. So definitely, if you want to get involved, again, you don't have to be in California 47. You can be anywhere in this country. I was on a call or interview, I should say, with Rep. Juan Vargas,
Mm.
and he's not in your district. And he specifically told everybody, he was like, I'm good. Like, I'm fine. Please help the districts around me in
Love it.
California get what they need to either put in new people or challenge GOP or whatever. Um, so we need to listen to him and his advice.
Mhm.
But Hunter, thank you so much for stepping up to the plate. I really appreciate, just to put a bow on the conversation, I really appreciate your balance of pragmatic policy and like getting to the nuts and bolts of how our country works with the humanitarian, human rights focus. Like, can we just be so for real about what our, military industrial complex is and like all this kind of thing? Like, we can have both. I think there's always this like weird either orism that happens when it comes to you're either a humanitarian or you're an economist when you're in the Democratic Party, and it's like
Right.
or why not both? Like, we can
Yep.
do both.
Yeah, it's pretty
Um,
simple.
yeah, it's really not that hard. Both and yeah. So as an independent, as most people know, I identify as one of those independent voters.
Mhm.
I really appreciate it when people just the do those nuanced takes. They get into the actual like practicalities of everything, and also say, and we can also not treat each other like crap. That is also good.
Mhm. What a
Um,
concept.
we love that. So, Hunter, thank you so much for your time today. Good luck. I will be, of course, watching your race very closely. And we appreciate what you are doing in Orange County. And don't be a stranger.
Thank you so much. I
Oh,
really appreciate it. So
yeah,
great.
of course. Everyone, have a good night.